بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Today we're going to do two things that are medically related, and so there's quite a few details around them, so you'll need to take some notes again. So we'll try and cover Jabira, and we'll cover Mas'ala Salasat al-Bawl. Okay? So we'll try and cover these two things today, and then we'll try and do a quick quiz at the end. Do a revision of everything you've done in the last 10 weeks. So, inshallah. So because we'll be finishing one chapter of Taharah and everything related to Taharah, and before we go on to the prayer, it'll be a good time to do some quick revision, inshallah. So the first is a thing called Jabira, and the Jabira is defined in three different things. Okay? It is some covering, cloth or other kind, that covers an ailing part of their body. An example would be that someone broke their bones and they have plaster over that fracture. That will be considered a jabira. Another example is that someone has a surgical wound or a burn and he has a bandage over that. That will be considered a jabira. So anything that is covering a sickness of the body. The second type of jabira is where medicine is applied to a sickness in the body. An ointment or some other kind of thing that will be considered under the classification of medicine. And what is common to both is that washing would cause harm if you washed either the bandage or the medicine. Or it might cause a prolongation of recovery. So let's say the recovery is usually 3 days, and if you washed it, it would get prolonged to 6 days or whatever else, then that will also meet the criteria. So when you are doing wudu or ghusl, then the three Imams, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, say that jabira should be wiped instead of washed, because washing will cause harm. So an example is that someone has a plaster over their right arm. So they started doing wudu and they washed their hands, they washed their face, and when they came to this side, there is a plaster on that and they cannot wash it, so they will wipe over it. And then they will continue with the washing of the rest of the parts that need washing and wiping. Imam Abu Hanifa has some particular things that are worthwhile mentioning. Number one, he does not require that wudu be present before the jabira is put on. As comparison to when you put the khuf, the leather socks, on the feet, what is the condition? That they must have been washed as part of wudu. Then you put the khuf on, and then when the wudu is broken after that, you can wipe over the khuf. Whereas with the jabira, naturally, if someone has broken their arm, right, and they go to the emergency department, he's not going to tell the doctor, wait, let me do wudu first. Okay, he's in pain, he needs treatment. They're going to whack on the plaster, when you come in. So there's no requirement for wudu to be there before the jabira is put on. They added two further conditions. If the jabira is able to be removed without causing harm, then you will wash around the injury, and when you come to the injury, then you will wipe over the injury. Because obviously washing the injury causes harm, whether it's a cut or wound or a burn or something else like that. If the jabira is unable to be removed, as if in a plaster or fracture of some kind, you can't remove it, it's there for 6 weeks, then in that situation, you will wipe over the jabira. Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal require the whole area to be wiped. And Imam Abu Hanifa requires most of the area. It does not have to be the entire area. Okay? Those are the easy ones. Now we come to Imam Shafi'i, who is hard. Okay? So you have to kind of try and understand Imam Shafi'i's perspective. Number one, he requires wudu to be present before the jabira is put on. Okay? And if the wudu was not present before the jabira was put on, I know the Malikis are like, what's going on? But this is the opinion of Imam Shafi'i. Okay, so listen to the opinion, and then I will give you a rukhsa at the end. Okay? So number one, he requires wudu to be present. Number two, he requires you to do wiping over the jabira, and on top of that, he requires that you do a tayammum in place of washing that limb. Okay? So I'll give you an example. Someone has a plaster over the right hand. They started with the hands, they did the face. When they came to the arm, they're able to wash this side, they can wash this side, they wipe over this, they stop the wudu at this point, they do a full tayammum. Okay? And tayammum is what? The face and the arms. Then they come back to the wudu and they complete the remainder of the wudu. So the next will be the head, does that, the ears, and then he comes and washes the feet. Okay? If there are two or more places jabira, he will do a tayammum for each of the jabiras. Okay? So Imam Shafi'i is the hardest in this, and it's also hard to remember. If the wudu is not present, then he will do wudu in this manner, and when the jabira is able to be removed, he will repeat those prayers that he has prayed. Okay? So Imam Shafi'i is the strictest and most difficult in this aspect. The others say that wudu does not have to be present because it is an illness. Imam Shafi'i takes the position that because in the khuf you wash the feet before you put the khuf on, he does qiyas on that because there was no washing done, then the wiping over it is in a sense not valid. You still have to pray in the time, but you have to repeat it later on. In some of the Shafi'i books it's present that if a person finds it difficult to do this, then he may follow the Hanafi method. Okay? And so their books give that rukhsa to follow that, which is that the person will wipe over it and his prayers will be valid. He does not need to repeat them. So if a person finds it easy, let's say he has a jabira on for 1 day or 2 days, that's easy enough to repeat the prayers. But if he has a plaster on for 6 weeks, then it becomes difficult to repeat all those prayers for 6 weeks. Then he will be given the rukhsa to follow the Hanafi method, which is just to wipe over it. I'm not going to do any more time. That's 10 minutes on jabira. Any questions about jabira?
Yes.
Yes.
To follow Imam
Abu Hanifa?
Abu Hanifa?
Yes.
I have to bring niyyah, or how can I?
The niyyah that you will do is that I am wiping over this jabira to get tahara, or to do wudu, or to get out of janaba, or whatever else. Okay? There is no niyyah required in following fiqh. Okay? But you are just thinking that my prayer is being valid on the basis of the fiqh of Imam Abu Hanifa. Okay?
If there is no jabira, just a wound of any place of the body which should be included in wudu.
Yeah.
So what we should do, simply like
if washing that wound will cause harm, and the vast majority of wounds will be considered like that. An example of a wound that will not cause harm is, let's say you got a small cut. There's no harm in washing that, right? Or you got a paper cut. A paper cut happens every day if you're at work. There's no harm from that, so you will wash that. But if there is a harm from a wound, it's a big enough wound, or you're worried it's going to get infected, then you will wash around it, and in that area you will wipe it with water. If you think even the wiping will cause water, then you put a bandage over it and you wipe over the bandage. Okay?
If you have, if you don't have one hand or something.
Okay.
If the whole hand is one, and you don't have how to...
The fuqaha have described a person who does not have feet and arms, and how is he going to do wudu. Usually those kinds of people, they use their upper arms or they use their forearms, right, to be able to do things, how they eat and how they dress themselves, right? So they will use whatever limbs they can to try and do the wudu. And then they finally describe a person who is unable to do wudu. He is not required to do wudu to pray. He can pray without it. But this circumstance is rare.
Doctor, what about with normal bandages or band-aid?
Yes.
Is that the same?
The band-aid will go to the same category. Is the wound underneath it able to be washed? Okay. If it's a small cut, then yes, it can be washed. If it is, a big cut like a surgical wound, it has stitches or something else like that, you put a bandage on top of that and then you can wipe over it. If you have a waterproof bandage that you can wash over it, then that will cover the same requirement. But from the fiqhi perspective, you don't have to wash the bandage, right? Because waterproof bandages did not exist.
Correct.
Right? So they allowed wiping over it. Okay, let's go and quickly cover Salas al-Bawl. I don't intend to do this extensively, okay? But it has a number of details which we'll try and cover in the next 10 minutes, inshallah. This is incontinence, okay? Whether it is incontinence of urine, feces, gas, or mazi, okay? Mazi, if you remember, is the arousal fluid, right? So if a person has a medical condition where urine keeps coming out, or he keeps on passing air, or he keeps on passing mazi, and these conditions do exist, then how will he do tahara? Because the problem is he goes to the toilet, he cleans himself, he does wudu. When he comes out of the toilet, more urine comes out, right? And then he goes back to do wudu, and when he comes out, more urine comes out. So how will this person gain tahara? First of all, what is the definition? The definition is that incontinence must exist for an entire prayer time. An example is the Dhuhr prayer enters, and you keep on having incontinence until Asr prayer enters. So it does not stop for a sufficient time to gain tahara and pray. That's the definition of almost everyone except for the Malikis. The Malikis say if it is for half of a prayer time, okay, then this person meets this category that we will discuss today. He can make wudu in this situation and pray as many prayers as he desires in one prayer time. Okay? So this person who meets this criteria, he will clean his private parts, he will clean his clothes. Additionally, he will put some kind of cloth or something similar to that around his private part. Okay? So in our times you can take tissue paper or something else like that to wrap around the private part to without harming the person, to try to prevent the incontinence. Okay? Then he will do wudu and then he will pray. So let's say he does wudu for Dhuhr. He can pray the 4 sunnah before Dhuhr. He then prays the 4 fard, and then he prays the 2 sunnah afterwards, all with one wudu. And if he desires, he wants to read Quran or do something else, he can do that. Asr time enters, the wudu is now broken, and he will now make a new wudu. If this person suffers from incontinence of urine, okay, then the condition only applies to that. If now let's say he passed air or he passed feces, then the wudu is broken as a result of that. So he doesn't have a permanent wudu, okay? He only has a wudu that is related to the incontinence that he has. In addition, this person should seek medical attention to try and get a cure for his problem. Okay? In general, the private parts should not be exposed to anyone except the wife. So when you go see a doctor, in general, the private part should not be exposed. But if a person has this condition that is preventing him from praying, and because of the tahara, then he has an excuse that the doctor can examine that as required. The final thing I wanted to say is that the clothes should be attempted to be cleaned for the prayer. Now, because this person has incontinence, as soon as he finishes the wudu, there's more najasa coming on the clothes. And so how does he pray? Well, he will pray with that on because he has no other option. He'll go and change, and then the najasa will be on the new clothes. He'll go and change, there'll be najasa on the new clothes. So there's no, winning in that scenario. So in that situation, he will pray in that condition. That's as much as I want to say with this. There are some things I had in my mind, and I investigated this. So one is having a urinary catheter. Sometimes when you have surgery, you get sick, you get admitted to a hospital, you get a tube put inside that goes into the catheter to collect the urine. So in this kind of situation, the urine is coming out continuously. You have like a liter of najasa sitting in the bag that's next to your bed or next to your leg or something like that. How will the person pray in this situation? I could not find the answer for all the four madhahib, but I found the Hanafis, they gave the fatwa that the catheter is treated as an internal organ. Okay? So it is like having a bladder attached to you. So it is that you don't have passed any urine, and the person can consider that he has wudu and he can pray with that. When the bag is emptied, they have to empty it after it collects a liter or 2 liters, they empty it. Then you can consider that the wudu was broken and you will do a new wudu with that. I could not find an answer from the Shafi'is from that, and I tried to find for it. If someone has a situation, he will need to find a Shafi'i alim for that. The other kind of situation is having a stoma. So, some people who have diseases of kinds where they get abdominal surgery done, the bowel is taken out and brought to the abdomen, and they have a stoma. That is usually entirely covered by a bag, and that will be a similar kind of situation to the urinary catheter. Okay? We will stop there. Any questions about Salat al-Bawl? Yes?
Okay, 2 things. One, can that person be imam?
Okay, very good question. Yes, I checked this as well. And I was meant to say it today, but I forgot to write it in my notes. I forgot to say it as well. Is that according to everyone, this person should not be an imam. Because if the imam has najasa on him, or his wudu is broken, that invalidates the prayer of the people behind him. Okay? As long as he is aware of that. If, let's say, the imam was not aware of any najasa on his clothes, then his prayer and the prayer behind him is also valid. Let's say then the imam prays, he finishes the prayer, afterwards he realizes there was some najasa while he was praying. The afdal thing, the better thing is to tell the people that the prayer was invalid, everyone should repeat the prayer. However, if he does not do that and only repeats his own prayer, then the prayer of the people behind him was valid. Okay? Because they were not aware of any invalidation in the prayer. So only Imam Shafi'i allows the person who has this condition to lead the prayer, but he considers it as makruh as well. Yes?
Secondly, can he pray during that period of time, qada from the previous prayer?
Yes, he can. Yes, he can. Because the qada prayer does not have a limit, so he can pray as many qada prayer as he requires. And
with that condition.
But he has to be within one prayer time. Remember, we will do, inshallah, next week we will start with the fiqh of salah, and we will start with the awqat al-salah, what are the prayer times, so we will discuss that in detail. Okay, quiz.